What's up everybody, my name is Phosphoros and today I'll be teaching you how to play Arcane in Dragonflight patch 10.1. I'll be telling you exactly what to press and what order for optimal damage, so let's get right into it. So first things first, let's take a look at our talents. On the general tree highlighted in green, you'll see the talents that I consider to be a requirement. These are talents that will give you a direct damage increase and should be included in every build. The only exception to this is if, for example, you're on a rating counter where you aren't getting full value from Shifting Power's cooldown reduction. In that specific scenario, you'd want to take Meteor. Outside of that, Shifting Power is the way to go. One thing to note here as well is that Temporal Warp allows you to have 2 Time Warp buffs active at the same time, so the play is to always try and double up on Temporal Warp whenever possible. As for the rest of the talents on the general tree, the tree is very flexible, so you can pretty much take whatever the situation calls for, whether that be a Dispel, Decurse, more CC in Dragon's Breath or Ring of Frost, or more tankiness. As for the common question of Shimmer versus Ice Flows, it's personal preference. You can use whichever you feel more comfortable with. However, I would recommend that if you only use Shimmer, try getting used to Ice Flows, as there are some situations where the extra freedom from stuns or roots that Blink provides can come in handy. Onto the Arcane tree, this is the pure single target build. We take Siphon Storm, Harmonic Echo, and Conjure Mana Gem as our capstones. Nether Tempest has a pretty strong synergy with Arcane Echo in that each time Nether Tempest ticks, it also procs Arcane Echo. Another notable talent is Nether Precision. This talent is the core of Arcane's filler and burst rotations, and you'll notice that this makes Arcane Blast our highest damaging ability outside of AoE situations. Whenever you're facing more than one target, we use this build for cleave damage. The only difference between this build and the single target build is that we remove 1 point from improved Arcane Missiles and instead put it into Arcane Cleave. Arcane Cleave allows our Arcane Barrage to spread to nearby targets and also increases the damage it deals to our primary target through the Resonance talent. Now you can pretty much just focus on using either of these 2 gem builds, but I'm still going to cover the Arcane Harmony builds. At the time of creating this guide, Arcane Harmony is less dominant compared to the gem build, although as the patch progresses it may end up creeping back into the spotlight, so the rotations section of this guide will be gem build focused, but I'll have a section towards the end dedicated to the Arcane Harmony build if you're still interested. With that out of the way, this is the pure single target build for Arcane Harmony. Compared to the gem build, we're taking points out of Enlightened, Prodigious Savant, and Conjure Mana Gem and instead putting them into Illuminated Thoughts, Concentration, and Arcane Harmony. Now one thing to note here is that Concentration has a slight anti-synergy with Nether Precision in that Concentration buffed Arcane Missiles will not generate Nether Precision stacks. Because of this, I recommend you get a Concentration and Nether Precision tracker, which will help you play around these 2 buffs. I'll have the trackers that I use linked down in the description of this video, as well as some other very helpful resources, so make sure to check that out as well. Now if you're in an encounter where you can cleave onto nearby targets but you still want to focus single target, you'll want to take a point out of improved Arcane Missiles and put it into Arcane Cleave. If you want a bit more AoE damage, you can take an extra point out of Impetus and put it into Charged Orb, and that's pretty much it for the Arcane Harmony build. Now before we head into the single target rotation, I'd like to speak a bit about Arcane's damage pattern. Arcane has a very ebb and flow style to its damage pattern. About every 45 seconds you'll have a big burn with Arcane Surge, followed by a period of low filler damage, into a mini burn, followed by another period of low filler damage, and then the cycle repeats. Alright, let's head into the single target rotation. 15 seconds before the pull, you want to be spamming Arcane Explosion to fish for clear casting procs. This part may vary based on your haste levels, but in general, 8 seconds before the pull starts you want to cast Evocation so we can start stacking Siphon Storm. At around 2 seconds, you want to cast Arcane Blast into an Arcane Orb precast. The pull has now begun, and we already have 4 Arcane Charges, so we're ready to start our Arcane Surge burn. However, this burn will change based on if you have Double Time Warp activated or not. So if you plan on popping Double Time Warp, you want to cast Nether Tempest into Rune of Power, and spam Arcane Blast until you have 4 GCDs left on Rune of Power. These 4 GCDs will be reserved for your Radiant Spark ramp. If you don't plan on popping Double Time Warp, then when the pull starts, you just drop a Rune of Power and head straight into your Radiant Spark ramp. So pop Radiant Spark, 3 Arcane Blasts, Nether Tempest, and then Arcane Surge into a Mana Gem. Next, you cast Arcane Blast and spellqueue an Arcane Barrage into it. If you're not sure what it means to spellqueue, I'll have an explanation of it down in the description. Next, cast Touch of the Magi while Barrage is traveling, but right before it lands. The reason that we pop Touch of the Magi while Barrage is traveling is so that we gain about an extra second of Touch of the Magi uptime, while still benefiting from Barrage inside it. Also, Touch of the Magi itself gives us 4 Arcane Charges, so right after Touch of the Magi we want to follow a simple priority list. Nether Precision buffed Arcane Blasts, clear casted Arcane Missiles, and regular Arcane Blasts. Now, Due to Arcane Bombardment, if your target is under 35% health, you want to barrage and have it land just before Touch of the Magi ends. Otherwise, use Presence of Mind to fit one last Arcane Blast into Touch. Once your Arcane Surge buff wears off, cast Shifting Power, and that's the end of the Arcane Surge burn. After the Surge burn, we head into the Filler Rotation. The Filler Rotation consists of following a simple priority list. Cast Arcane Orb at less than 2 Arcane Charges, Arcane Blast with Nether Precision, Arcane Missiles with Clear Casting, and regular Arcane Blasts. Now, when in Filler, you'll need to conserve mana for your next upcoming burn. Many burns require 60% mana or 85% mana in Time Warp. In the case that you need to conserve to maintain these levels of mana, you can Nether Tempest at 4 Arcane Charges, Arcane Barrage to clear your Arcane Charges, and during Time Warp it may even be worth to use Ice Nova, Fire Blast, and Frostbolt in that order. If you're wondering why I specifically mentioned 4 Arcane Charges for Nether Tempest, that's because Nether Tempest snapshots its damage based on the amount of charges when it was cast, so it's really only worth casting at 4 Arcane Charges. Just like last time, I created a cheat sheet that you can find in the description of this video, and it'll have everything you need to know about the rotation, so you can have that pulled up on the side while practicing. Now let's head into the mini burn rotation. Make sure you have 4 Arcane Charges, pop Rune of Power, Radiant Spark, 4 Arcane Blasts, Nether Tempest, and an Arcane Blast with an Arcane Barrage spell queued into it. Next, cast Touch of the Magi while Barrage is traveling but right before it lands. From here we once again follow a simple priority list. Nether Precision buffed Arcane Blasts, clear casted Arcane Missiles, and regular Arcane Blasts. If your target is under 35% health, cast Barrage such that it lands right before Touch of the Magi ends, otherwise use Presence of Mind to fit one last Arcane Blast into Touch. From here you enter back into the Filler Rotation until Evocation comes off cooldown, and the rotation effectively resets to the Arcane Surge burn stage. Here's a quick 3-minute segment of me performing the single target rotation on a training dummy. One thing to note is that during Touch of the Magi, it's a slight damage increase to cancel clear-casted missiles early so you can get more Nether Precision buffed Arcane Blasts in. I won't be demonstrating that here, but it's something you can start doing if you want to. I'll also have each stage of the rotation pop up on the screen so you can follow along. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the comments. Now let's head into the AoE portion of the guide. We want to begin using the AoE rotation when we reach 3 targets. So here's what the Surge Burn will look like. Radiant Spark into either Arcane Orb if you have less than 3 Arcane charges, or Arcane Explosion if you have 3 or more Arcane charges. From here you cast Nether Tempest into Arcane Surge and Mana Gem. Then you cast Arcane Barrage into Touch of the Magi, an Arcane Blast, and another Arcane Barrage. Now, one thing you need to keep in mind for AoE is that each of the barrage casts should not be spellqueued. After that second barrage, you follow a simple priority list. Arcane Missiles while clear casting, Arcane Barrage at 4 Arcane charges, Arcane Orb at less than 2 Arcane charges, and Arcane Explosion. Once your Arcane Surge buff wears off, cast Shifting Power, and that's the end of the Arcane Surge burn. From here you enter the filler rotation. The filler rotation for AoE is a simple priority list. Cast Ice Nova on cooldown, apply Nether Tempest at 4 Arcane charges, Arcane Orb at less than 2 Arcane charges, Arcane Barrage at 4 Arcane charges, and Arcane Explosion until 4 Arcane charges. Now for the mini burn. Cast Rune of Power and Radiant Spark into either Arcane Orb if you have less than 3 Arcane charges, or Arcane Explosion if you have 3 or more Arcane charges. Then you cast Nether Tempest and Arcane Barrage into Touch of the Magi. From here, cast 2 Arcane Blasts and another Arcane Barrage. Once again, make sure to not spellqueue these barrages, and after that second barrage, you can follow a simple priority list. Arcane Missiles with clear casting, Arcane Barrage at 4 Arcane charges, Arcane Orb at less than 2 Arcane charges, and Arcane Explosion. Once Touch of the Magi wears off, you enter back into the filler rotation until Evocation's off cooldown, and the rotation effectively resets back to the Arcane Surge burn stage. Here's a quick 2-minute segment of me performing the AoE rotation on a group of training dummies. Keep in mind that in this clip I'm getting multiple burns out, but in a Mythic Plus scenario you'll mostly be alternating between the Arcane Surge burn and mini burn between packs. Now before I end the video, if you plan on using the Arcane Harmony build, most of the rotation is exactly the same as what we just covered except for these 3 scenarios. You aren't casting Mana Gems since you don't have it talented. In the single target burn during Double Lust, you want to make sure you have 20 stacks of Arcane Harmony by the time you start your Radiant Spark ramp. And in the AoE filler rotation, you want to use clearcasting procs on Arcane Missiles. So if you're following that rotation, Arcane Harmony is basically treated as a passive damage increase to Arcane Barrage. The only times you actually pay attention to the stacks are to end each pull at 20 stacks in Mythic Plus, or store some damage for phases where a boss will be taking increased damage. Alright guys, that's the end of the video. I hope this saved you some time and brought you up to speed. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to ask in the comments, as I'm very active there and that's the easiest place to reach me. Please subscribe, I appreciate the support, and I wish you a very nice day. Take care.